The first day of the Daisy Link trial are kicked off today. At the time of recording, it is the 8th of October 2025. And after the testimonies had wrapped up today, I was left wondering whether Daisy was lying about her version of events that night when she was speaking with the police officers on that fateful night where Pedro Jimenez, her husband, had lost his life. You may have come across this case sometime last year where she had went viral because she was pregnant with another inmate while she was in prison. According to Daisy, both John DePass, who was the other inmate, and her had hatched up a plan where he was to put his semen in a saran wrap every day for a month and would transport it through the vents, and then she would then use her yeast infection applicators to inseminate the semen in her, U-ha. So this happened, and there poof came the pregnancy. She calls it a miracle baby. Listen, I'm not going to go through this whole baby story. That's not what this video is about, but I have left a link for you. Hi, I go by the name of Heinz, your friendly neighborhood ketchup man, and welcome to Ketchup Court, where we are on a mission to make trials more digestible for you. So if you are unable to sit through all 7 hours of a trial or go to a courtroom to experience the proceedings for yourself, don't worry, we have got you covered right here. So for this particular video, rather than go through the baby story that we introduced earlier, I am going to go through why Day One has set up such an interesting premise and an interesting story for how this trial is going to unfold. We heard key testimonies from police officers who testified that Daisy was allowed to walk around and roam free, and she was not really considered as a suspect, but rather a potential witness to a shooting. Therefore, it is imperative for us in this video to go through the opening statements and find out what exactly both sides were talking about in their theories of the case. So for the prosecution opening statements, they presented their theory saying that both Daisy and Pedro Jimenez were in an unhealthy relationship.
And just like in any relationship, it wasn't perfect. It had its problems. There were arguments, anger, and even jealousy. So, on Friday, June 24th of 2022, while being back in town from work, Mr. Jimenez began to have suspicions that his partner was cheating. So, he decided to ask and see whether or not that was true. The defendant ends up denying it. They go on about their day. They continue to act as if they were. In fact, you can see surveillance footage of them that night coming back together to the home as a family, together with the children. Now, video later on that night, that's when the murder occurs. But as that night progresses, Mr. Jimenez can't stand the fact that potentially his partner is cheating on him. So what does he do? He decides to go over to a friend's home. And she comes to that home and demands that he leaves there and comes back home with her. So he complies. He goes back home with her. It's Saturday, June 25th. And you're going to find out that Mr. Jimenez and the defendant, they decide to step outside of the home and to go into the porch. But interesting enough, she brought out a firearm with her. Miss Link tells police officers that when she saw Mr. Jimenez out there, he had a look of betrayal. So she told him and confirmed that she had cheated on him. He threatened her by telling her, "You're going to sleep outside tonight." In a fit of rage, she pulled out the gun, pointed it at the victim, and the facts will show that when the defendant pointed the gun at Mr. Jimenez, he had turned around and was running away.
The defense came out swinging, and I personally did not expect what their opening statements was going to entail, because they alleged from the bat that Pedro Jimenez was abusive to Daisy in their 9-year relationship.
A very toxic relationship. And in the days leading up to Mr. Jimenez's death, the relationship took a significant turn for the worst.
Was so abusive that he had lost custody of the kids, and Daisy had changed the locks and also taken his name off the lease.
5 days before Mr. Jimenez's death, he showed up unannounced to Daisy Link's home. And to be clear, the evidence will show it was her home. He didn't live there anymore. He was removed from the lease. The locks were changed. He was not allowed in there unless he was specifically invited. And yes, he would be invited because they had kids together, and Miss Link was gracious enough to let him see those kids, even though he didn't have a right to be with them because he lost his parental rights to those kids. He showed up unannounced 5 days before, and Miss Link had some guests in her home. She was in her home with her 2 kids, and immediately he accused Miss Link of cheating on him, even though they weren't together anymore, cheating on him with this man. Mr. Jimenez was informed, hey, I'm not cheating, that's my cousin, and I'm not sleeping with my cousin. And he physically attacked the cousin, David, and he physically attacked Miss Link. He essentially split her head wide open. He left multiple lacerations on her head, and he didn't stop until his 7-year-old son said, Bobby, please stop. Bobby, please stop.
This was a bizarre revelation to reveal in the opening statements. And Antonio Tomas went on to say that Daisy did not mean to kill Pedro Jimenez.
But she wasn't even trying to kill him. She wanted him to leave. She did everything she could to get him to leave before she fired that shot. And ladies and gentlemen, the evidence will show she fired that shot because she had no choice. And under this scenario and under those facts, that means she's not guilty because it's not a crime to defend yourself.
So therefore, it is important for me to establish why I went away thinking that she was not a suspect in this case and only a witness. Why was that the case if both the prosecution and the defense told the jury in their opening statements that she was the one to have released the trigger and shoot him? Why would that be the case, yet the police did not consider her a suspect or and only a potential witness? So to better understand this, we need to introduce the witnesses in the case. We had the first witness, Bonilla, who was the friend of Pedro Jimenez. We had Sergeant Nicholson, who was the second witness, the police officer, Dennis Aguilar, another police officer, Deputy Edwards, who was another police officer, Sergeant Yadel Rodriguez, who was a police officer on the scene as well, Yapa Huri, I believe that's her name, I probably butchered it, but she was the deputy sheriff on the case. And then we had Robert Cisneros, I believe that's his name, again I probably butchered it, but he was the neighbor and also a firefighter. And these were really quick testimonies for today, beginning with Bonilla, but the real meat is when the police officers gave their testimony about what happened that day on the scene. But with Bonilla, he confirmed the state's theory of the case, where it was firmly established that Daisy had come to pick up Pedro Jimenez from his house, and then they drove back to her house. And the defense focused on his lack of knowledge about the relationship that both Pedro and Daisy had. Therefore, it was imperative to establish whether Jimenez was doing drugs when he was at Bonai's house, but he was unable to establish this because he could not remember whether that was happening. So we have to wait for more witnesses to come in and testify to this fact that was raised in the opening statements. But the next set of testimonies is where a lot of the questions were raised, as we got to hear what the police were speaking with Daisy about that night and what her statements to them were that night. The first responder, Sergeant Nicholson, said that he saw the victim lying on the ground with blood on his lower abdomen and his leg, with the defendant Daisy yelling at him. He testified to interviewing her and to get her account of what happened that night.
Do you know him? To the defendant, and she said it was her husband.
So I want to go back to when you arrived at the alleyway. Where was the victim in the alleyway?
He was laying on the ground in the middle of the alleyway,
And where was the defendant when you got there?
standing over his right side. I did see blood on him. There was a good amount of blood, on his legs, on his, like abdominal area. At that point in time, the alleyway was very dark. I lit it up with my lights of my police car, but it's still a dark area. I had my flashlight out.
And who was answering the questions you were asking to the victim?
The defendant answered the majority of the questions.
What was she saying?
Believe at one point she stated, what happened. Like she was asking him what happened. She, was upset. She was asking where rescue was.
Did she tell you how she got there?
She said that she said that she was out looking for him.
Okay, and do you remember her saying anything about the shot and the wounds on his body?
Just when I asked, were you shot? She said, I believe he was shot, and then she pointed to the location.
Edwards, the person. Hey, I need you to calm down, mama. I need you to calm down. What's your W? Right there in the top. Right down. Hey, no, hey, look at me, please. No, Pedro, hey, look at me, please. Pedro, please.
It was never actually established whether she was the one to have shot him or it was somebody else, and it wasn't even asked on cross-examination who shot him. The next officer, Dennis Aguilar, gave a really brief testimony of what his account was when he had spoken with Daisy, and he said that Daisy had told him that she heard Pedro Jimenez scream, so therefore she went to the alleyway. Another officer, Deputy Edwards, gave testimony about his account when he was speaking with the defendants.
Did she tell you anything about their relationship?
She advised they were together for about 10 years and that they've had their ups and downs. However, she didn't know who would possibly do this to him.
It got even stranger on cross-examination, where Officer Edwards had said that she was being treated as a potential witness rather than a suspect. The next officer, Sergeant Yadel Rodriguez, gave testimony about the defendant, telling him that Jimenez got in a white van and started walking around that particular area. That's when she had got into the car and started driving around looking for him and ended up in the alleyway. At this point, you must be wondering what on earth is happening and why are we not hearing testimony from the police determining who had shot this person according to Daisy, and what have we heard on that opening statement? The next few witnesses are basically going to give you a better idea of what's to come in this trial. That's where we heard from Yafahuri. Again, I am butchering her name, so apologies for this, but she was the surgeon on the case, and she basically gave a bizarre testimony about how there was a bloody trail leading to SUVs at the car park, and there was a green pickup with blood coming from the passenger side of that green pickup. This was really, really bizarre. She also gave testimony about the victim lying face up and was basically shot on the thigh. This was, like I said, bizarre testimony because it leads you to basically ask the question, was he shot at the vehicle and then was walking back to the alleyway? What's actually going on here? We heard testimony from Robert Cisneros. His testimony was basically brief. He was the neighbor and also a firefighter. He said that he had security cameras that was in proximity to the alleyway where Daisy and Pedro Jimenez was found lying in, and he just gave testimony about how there was about how he had seen the footage. There was a whole commotion during the trial about what's exactly in the footage because they needed an expert to try and retrieve the footage, but the witness is basically saying that he had seen the footage for himself and can testify to the contents. Therefore, based on all of these testimonies, the next few days are going to be hella interesting. I have made a report of all the testimonies that were given today so that you can easily catch up. The links are in the description. So, is she lying? I don't have enough information to actually make that determination, but it does seem very, very weird that we got to hear that she was the one that pulled the trigger from both sides, yet she is telling the police officers something that just doesn't seem to add up in my eyes.
Did she tell you anything about their relationship?
She advised they were together for about 10 years and that they've had their ups and downs. However, she didn't know who would possibly do this to him.
Maybe I'm overthinking this. I have no idea, but you would think I shot him. He was doing this, he was doing that. But we're not hearing that. She just said that he was shot, and that was basically it. That's what we got to hear. Again, maybe I am overthinking it, but the DV history is very interesting because that is going to play a massive part in this trial. Is she a DV victim? We are most likely going to hear a lot of testimony to attest to this because even the prosecution had copped to that. Well, I don't know if they have copped to the DV, but they have basically said as much, that Jimenez was not a nice guy, etc. So that could tilt this trial completely on his head. But what do you think of the day so far? Let me know in the comments below. What are your thoughts? Do you think that she's lying? What do you make of all of these testimonies? Let me know in the comment section below. Anyways, if you've made it this far, you've got great taste. Make sure that you hit that like button if this video was of value for you. Also, consider supporting the channel. Become a tastemaker today and join our great community by hitting that join button on YouTube, or checking out our Patreon coffee page, or by making a one-off donations. The link are in the description below. If you got a taste for the law, you're already one of us. Make it official by joining us. We have covered other trials on this channel. Similar case to this is the Dade v. Heard coverage that we did, which had instances of DV in it. Of course, no one died in that case. It could have happened if you listened to that Australia incident, but the cards should be coming up on your screen. Go and check out our coverage of that case. I go by the name of Hines, your friendly neighborhood catch-up man, and I'll see you on the next one. This has been The Catch Up.